Hello. Hello.
Sir, we will begin shortly.
All right. I just wanted to check. That's it. I just want to check my background if it's okay.
Okay, sir. Good evening, all. A warm welcome to all of you to the fourth day of Faculty Development Program of St. Mary's College, Puttanangadi, themed on effective teaching strategies in higher education. We have successfully completed 3 days of our journey here, and we're all very proud and happy with the way things are going. Let's begin the session with a prayer.
ഹൃദയരാഗതന്ത്രിമീട്ടി സ്നേഹഗീതമേകിയും കർമ്മഭൂമി തളിരിടുന്ന വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമാദിനാമം ഇന്നു വാഴ്ത്തിടാം. ഞങ്ങൾ പാടുമീ സ്വരങ്ങൾ കീർത്തനങ്ങളാകണേ. ചോടുവയ്ക്കുമീ പദങ്ങൾ നൃത്തലോലമാകണേ. കുഞ്ഞു വീടിനുൾക്കളങ്ങൾ സ്വർഗമാകണേ. അമ്മ നൽകുമുമ്മ പോലും അമൃതമാകണേ. പൂർണ്ണമീ ചരാചരങ്ങൾ ഗുരുവരങ്ങളാകണേ. ഹൃദയരാഗതന്ത്രിമീട്ടി സ്നേഹഗീതമേകിയും കർമ്മഭൂമി തളിരിടുന്ന വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമാദിനാമം ഇന്നു വാഴ്ത്തിടാം.
Yesterday, we had a highly interactive session on the best practices in learner-centered teaching. Today, we have our esteemed resource speaker, Dr. Kennedy Andrew Thomas, who will be enlightening us about research-integrated teaching. I cordially invite Mr. Sandeep from the Department of Commerce, St. Mary's College, for the welcome address.
Thank you, Sneha. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you. Good evening, all. Thank you, everyone who joined us this evening. I'm extremely delighted to address you all on the fourth day of Faculty Development Program, Effective Teaching Strategies in Higher Education. I deem it as a great honor to welcome you all. First and foremost, I welcome our college principal, Reverend Father Denny Cholapalin, who is the strong pillar of our St. Mary's family. Welcome, Father. And I'm extremely happy to welcome our patron, Dr. Sudarshan Kumar, HOD, Department of Chemistry, to this event. Welcome, sir. And I'm very much honored and feel gratitude to welcome our guest, our resource person, Dr. Kennedy Andrew Thomas, Assistant Professor, Christ University, Bangalore, who will experienced person in various field of education. And here to enumerate the research integrated teaching. Welcome, sir. Whatever the event is, it is said to be successful only if there are a bunch of participants. With immense pleasure, I welcome each and every enthusiastic participants gathered here from all over the country. Welcome you all. Lastly, I am very much happy to welcome all my colleagues, and also I thank the organizing team to give me an opportunity to speak on this occasion. Once again, I welcome you all for the fourth day of faculty development program to know the research integrated teaching. Thank you. Over to you, Sneha.
Thank you, Sandeep, sir. We have with us Dr. Kennedy Andrew Thomas, who is currently an Associate Professor of School of Education at Christ University, Bangalore. He is the Director of CEDBEC, Center for Education Beyond Curriculum in Christ University. He has published articles on some relevant topics like healthcare excellence, medical education, and the business of education and ethical quest. Mr. Kennedy has also launched a blog titled Building Competencies of the Faculty in January 2020. He has been excellent in guiding and adjudicating research scholars for the last 10 years. He was awarded the Best Quality Management Personnel by Indian Psychometric and Education Research Association in 2015. He is also honored by the UGC Human Resource Development Center, Bharathidasan University, Mount Carmel College, Bangalore University for his valuable talks on different topics in educational fields and research methodology. Welcome, sir. You may begin your session now.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Father Denny. You can hear me now, Sneha, madam?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
All right. Thank you, Father Denny, Dr. Sudarshan Kumar, Dr. Sister Udaya, and Professor Sarada Anil Kumar. Thank you for inviting me for today's session on faculty development, a very relevant topic, especially in the context of the seven-day FDP required by the UGC. Well, what I'm going to share today is not something new. It has been there for ages. It's only a reorientation and a conceptual re-understanding of how, teaching is important, and teaching is important in the present context, and how teaching is critical to move the country ahead in the coming decades. All right, on that note, let me try and share my slides to you. Thank you for inviting me once again. All right, so in the next 1 hour, 20 minutes or something, now I have, put all my experience visiting several universities across the world, and also my own work at the university, and my own personal experiences, and also what is the current developments going on in understanding research and teaching as two sides of the same coin. So that's what I'm bringing to you today. So probably I'm trying to map the whole presentation into these 4 points. One is the context of higher education, what's happening, and why it is important that we are discussing about the research integrated teaching today. And when I say that, higher education is not something exclusive to the whole system of education. So in fact, all of us who are in the higher education, we are actually receiving students. We are receiving children who are coming in from the school education. And therefore, the school education forms part of the continuum of their education. So it's important that the policymakers and with the national new education policy, they have envisioned very clearly to look at the whole system of education from a holistic perspective. Thanks to the policy, thanks to the government, and we are looking forward to drive the nation into a new level in the coming years. All right. So that's I talk a little bit of the context of higher education because that's where I'm placing today's discussion. And then we look at the concept of research itself in higher education. I will not go into the nuances of research because it's not a PhD class. Okay. I can see a lot of very experienced professors. And today's presentation is a kind of a benchmarking for all of us, and we learn together some of the ideas which I've captured, and I've been given the task to talk about research integrated teaching. So that is how we can build a culture of research integrated teaching. I may use the word research informed teaching or research and teaching. So how we build a research integrated teaching culture, and probably look at a kind of a value model. So across I'm bringing to you several literature and work in the field so that all of us will gear up and meet the challenges that the nation is expecting and the world at large is expecting from all of us. Well, let me go straight to what I have to discuss today. Teaching and research are two sides of the same coin and help improve higher education while creating a better society around us. So that's the crux of, so therefore, as far as what is envisioned, what is expected of all of us as teachers in higher education, there's nothing to go back. So it's already time that we need to do adequate amount of research, and teaching. How we are going to blend that is going to be a challenge. Well, however, when we look at the Indian education system, it is challenged by several difficulties, several heterogeneous conditions. Maybe we don't have a infrastructure for research. There could be social and regional issues, locational, then also several aspects of the technological and aspirational issues, just to give you a couple of things to get this policy moving ahead. All right. So the quality of research has always been particularly overlooked in our country. I'm sure that all of you will agree. And with the NIRF coming in and the world ranking coming in, you know, the major chunk, and with the NAC accreditation, once we are already in higher education, sufficient amount of weightage is given to research. So it is time has come that we prioritize. Okay, and in fact, it's not only the mood in India, but it's a global mood, and therefore what I'm trying to put across is that when the country came up with this National Education Policy 2020, the whole idea was to revamp the system. So to put it in a nutshell and in a very simple words, okay, I quote Amit Bandre when in one of his writings, he says many of the world's nations are trying to reinforce the quality of research, and India too has come up with the National Education Policy 2020. Well, apart from that, there is the the expectation of the UGC regulations of 2009, 2016, and 2019. Okay, so several literature, newspaper reports which are covering about the project, about the policy and developments in higher education, gives a clear focus on the aspect of research and the quality of research, and how we can build a very strong nation backed up with our education system, especially in the higher education. Well, now having said that, we need to look at research and what's driving research in higher education, and what is the present context. So drawing from the national policy and other aspects, if you look at the higher education section, chapter part 2, chapter 9 to 19, you have the whole policy talking about how we need to conceptualize the future of higher education in India. I'm not going to the nuances because a lot of discussions have already happened in almost all the colleges and almost in every state about the implications and also the practical implementation of the national policy. Well, what is important is that when we're looking at the national policy, now we need to understand that, one aspect which the chapter which is dedicated to quality universities and colleges which says a new and forward-looking vision for India's higher education system. As I said, some of the major problems are plaguing the higher education, and the focus is on research. The lack of research at most universities and colleges, and transparent and competitive peer-reviewed research funding across disciplines. So not only publications, but also funding. So therefore, who's going to bell the cat? So that's the point of discussion. So what drives the academics and the education system and the governance of higher education system? Now, we have a policy, and it's the responsibility of institutions, colleges, autonomous, affiliated, whatever, and all individual players in higher education, which includes you and me. So we need to do our best. So therefore, that's the focus. And if you look at the policy itself, there are the term research is repeated more than 100 times. Okay, and therefore it very clearly says the emphasis of the 2020 policy that we need to focus on research, and therefore we cannot go back. And therefore, one of the things that this policy envisions a complete overhaul and re-energizing of higher education system to overcome these challenges. So therefore, where do we look for, and what do we look for? Reaffirming the integrity of faculty and institutional leadership positions through, merit appointments and career progression based on teaching, research, and service. All that is going to come into play. So better we pull up our socks, and therefore we encourage not only the teachers and the faculty and we ourselves undertaking research, but also encourage students to get into research and start publishing. So therefore, the establishment of a national research foundation to fund outstanding peer-reviewed research and to actively seed research in universities and colleges are all some of the provisions of the policy. So therefore, if you look at chapter 10, we are looking at a new vision. Now, this vision of higher education envisages, in particular, a new vision, what constitutes higher education in the institution. The focus is on, we are looking at a multidisciplinary institution of higher learning that offers undergraduate and graduate programs with high quality teaching, research, and community engagement. So therefore, when I talk about community engagement, later in my presentation, I'll be talking about a concept called a social capital. And therefore, what's interesting in the policy is that I have to congratulate the organizers for bringing in this topic, because when we talk about the definition of a university, which all of us are part of it, of course, you may be in an affiliated or an autonomous college, but the definition of university does allow a spectrum of institutions that range from those that place equal emphasis on teaching and research-intensive universities, to those that place greater emphasis on teaching, but still continue to do significant research. So we are not spared, whether you're going to be autonomous or affiliated or going to be part of the affiliated university system. All right. So therefore, some of the next important challenges that I picked up this from the policy. Another interesting word that caught my attention was inquiry-driven. So very interestingly, what this inquiry-driven aspect related to teaching is all about. That's one of the key challenge of teaching, and that drives the quality of teaching. So when you look at the challenges of research, high-quality research, original evidence-based research will drive the policy and practice in higher education. Similarly, the national policy to give you in summation that the academics and education system is going to be governed by the national policy. So it's important that, like a manual, like a ready reckoner and a dictionary, we need to get faculty to look into what the policy has envisaged for all of us. Okay, all right. So having said that, as I mentioned, I've already spoken about these two ideas from the two chapters of the national policy. I've also spoke about how mechanism for granting graded autonomy to colleges through a transparent system of graded accreditation is going to be determined by high quality research. So, and in the due course of time, it is envisaged that every college would develop into either an autonomous degree granting college or a constituent college of a university. And in the latter case, it would be fully a part of the university with appropriate accreditations. So autonomous degree granting colleges could evolve into research-intensive or teaching-intensive universities if they so aspire. So what I'm trying to say is that if we are going to focus on research, and if all of us are going to concentrate on research, I think there is a huge scope for the faculty to develop himself or herself to the maximum potential. All right. And I've also spoken about one definition of the university, which is basically focusing on multidisciplinary institution. And that's very, very critical as far as our discussion for today is concerned. Well, having said, what is research? Okay, I won't go to any textbook definitions, because you can always Google, you can always refer and look into literature. But let me bring the understanding of research, because we're going to talk about research-informed teaching, research-integrated teaching, research and teaching. What is the debate going on? What is the understanding? What are the kind of arguments that people have as far as research-integrated teaching is concerned? Is it possible, first of all? So let's look at the concept of research. So in my understanding, research is a very general term for an activity that involves finding out in a systematic way things you did not know. So I think all of us, I mean, you and me are all specialists in the particular field, right? So all of us are subject specialists, but how do we push the frontiers of knowledge? How do we advance knowledge? In fact, new generation students are coming. How do we get them to improve their knowledge? I think that's going to be a big, big challenge. Okay, so that's why I say I don't go to any, I mean, it's not researching, but I always tell my PhD students, please, after 3 years of your work after you have registered for a PhD, please do not come and tell me that this is what is known. Come and tell me what was not known to you, what was not known to others either. Okay, what is the new thinking? What is your new finding? So that's the key as far as research is concerned. Well, I mean, just to qualify, the concept of research, I think two important ideas are important. It's about how the process. Why I'm using this, because when we're looking at teaching today, I mean, I was reflecting, how can we teach? Today when we're getting into the classroom, we don't need to really drive information, because students have, with the internet gateways coming in, with the floodgate of internet opened up, right? They will get the information. But have they processed? Have they understood how to solve the real problems? Okay, people are talking about action research, etc. Right now, is that research is all about how, about real problems. So can we actually contribute to the field of research? All right. So to sum up, a process of investigation. Research is a process of investigation leading to new insights effectively shared. So when I mean effectively shared, all our research will have to be, publicized. It has to be published, and it is not to end up in the shelves. So the two challenges of research that we are facing is what is high quality research, and secondly, now the emerging with the pandemic around, and all of you know, when the companies were trying to produce the vaccines, there was a great demand on data. So therefore, what is the evidence? How many clinical trials that they have about the vaccines? Okay, so whether it's effective or not effective. So therefore, today, just doing an armchair research won't help, right? We have to contribute to evidence-based research, and therefore, involving students in the research, engaging students in the research is going to be very critical. So, what is high-quality research? Okay, so one of the major challenges, as I said, what is the high-quality research? What do we mean by high-quality research? Well, having said that, let me put this across to you. There are some kind of an understanding by experts who say that high quality research is based on the work of others. Now, that means I'm not saying about plagiarism, but I'm using the two key words, right? How we move from what is known to what is unknown. That means you have to be a part of that interesting concept called community of inquiry, which I will open up a little later. All right. So therefore, it is based on the work of others. So what is, we need to move from what is known to what is not, or what is unknown. All right. So at the same time, high quality research is something that can be replicated. Okay, it has to be something that is generalizable to other settings and is based on some logical rationale tied to the theory. It is something which is doable. Okay, it's not, I mean, we need to look at research which is more something called the experts call as community-based research, something which we can bring about a change. Okay, look at how the vaccines for corona has given hope and life. Otherwise, we all would have disappeared like the dinosaurs. So it is to be doable, generate new questions, or is cyclical in nature. So when one phase of the research ends, it has to lead to new problems, new understanding, and therefore it has to continue. It is incremental and it is an apolitical activity. So, I mean, research has to be, people who are undertaking research have to be passionate. They have to look at research not for academic purposes, not for careers. In fact, the UGC and the government saying that faculty have to undertake research from a career point of view is only to give you a push. But then if everybody, all of us as part of a faculty development, get all the skills and the passion for research, I think that is what can bring about change in the society. All right. Having said that, my problem is that, since I mentioned that the two basic problem of higher education research is one is the high quality research and evidence-based research. So just to give you I want to ramble up fast just to give you an idea to tell you what this, the evidence-based research is, right? So the roots of the evidence-based research lies in medicine, where the advocacy by Cochrane in 1972 is as old as 1972. We're talking about 2021 today, where they talked about a randomized controlled trials together with a systematic review and documentation led to the foundation of the Cochrane collaboration, the Maynard and Chalmers referred in 1997, which is now worldwide. So that's the origin of evidence-based research, and we need to intensify that in the present context. All right. So having said that, during the 1980s, the term evidence-based medicine emerged to describe the approach that used scientific evidence to determine best practice. Okay, why not we learn from this idea of evidence-based research practice? So evidence-based practice movement started in England in the early 1990s, and it's become very, very popular today. And that we need to look at. So therefore, the careful quantitative-based research studies that can contribute to the growth of an evidential base is seen to be a powerful counter to the often untried, under-tested schemes that injected into the practice. So what am I trying to say? So I'm saying that when we're talking about randomized control, I mean, from the concept point of view, RCT is a study in which people are allocated at random to receive one of the several clinical interventions. And therefore, one of these interventions is the standard of comparison or control, just to give you the concept, right? Now, having said that, so what is evidence here typically comes from the randomized controlled trials of one hue or another. I'm saying that our research and our research integrated teaching should be evidence-based. So therefore, I'm leading on Anderson and Beadle. Today what happens is all policymakers shun evidence in the development of policy, and practitioners in their busy life, okay, so of everyday activity, call upon tacit knowledge rather than knowledge which is derived from RCT, randomized controlled trials. So therefore, we make decisions. Policymakers they make decisions, and therefore expect everybody to follow without appropriate evidence as far as research is concerned. So research has to be evidence-based. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Tacit knowledge, the whims and fancies based on a few people's wisdom, based on a few people's observation and experience will not work, because the times have changed, and all of us who are undertaking research now will have to move towards the evidence-based research. So that's the point that I'm trying to make, the two challenges that I raised as far as research is concerned. So unless we understand the challenges of research, the high quality research, okay, now high quality research, the first point is what is known, how we move from known to the unknown, right? And at the same time, how we look at evidence-based research. If we don't integrate that, our teaching is going to be meaningless as far as integrating research into teaching is concerned. Challenge number 3 is a challenge of inquiry. So we are talking about teaching. So what I'm trying to say is that with the large changes, with quickly changing employment landscape, you ask all the professors who are in the who are teaching management science, and organizational science, right? Now, there is a total change as far as the employment landscape is concerned. And this is changing across the world, and therefore it's a global ecosystem is changing. And therefore, it's becoming increasingly critical that children, what I'm saying is, and children not only learn, but become more, but learn more importantly, learn how to learn. So therefore, children, students, learners, even students at the higher education level. So therefore, education must move towards less content and more towards learning about how to think critically and solve problems. That's why I said research is something about how and to solve real problems. Okay, so therefore, once you are graduating out of the university, or students are graduating out of the university, right? Don't imagine that the jobs are already laid out. So there are a lot of different skills. So how we look at the curriculum, somewhere we'll talk about the curriculum as I go along. So therefore, pedagogy must evolve to make education more experiential, holistic, integrated, inquiry-driven, discovery-oriented, learner-centered, discussion-based, flexible, and of course, enjoyable. Now, these are all ideas that are emanating from the policy. And therefore, let me put a very serious question to all of you. Don't you think that we are not conscious of this? Why is the policy telling us today? Is because, as I said, there is a sea change in the employment world as far as the global ecosystem is concerned. So, if you look at very carefully in the policy, it talks about curriculum, which include basic arts, crafts, humanities, games, everything, and it has to be enjoyable. Okay, and therefore, what is important is that I think there are sessions on outcome-based learning coming up as a 5th and 6th session, I guess, right? So the gap between the current state of learning outcomes and what is required must be bridged through the undertaking of major reforms that bring highest quality, equity, and integrity into the system. So the responsibility lies in the hands of the faculty like you and me. All right. Now, having said that, I'm raising this challenge and reminding you again, teaching has to be inquiry driven. See, don't go by lecture. Lecturing times are gone. Okay, 50 hours of lecturing is not going to help the students. Okay, you may be guessing, you may be thinking you have 100% attendance in the class and attendance is mandatory, but think much more deeper. Is the student learning? Is the student really enjoying, or is his mind elsewhere? When students come into the practical labs, are they really picking up the skills? So these are the aspects that, beyond, beyond teaching and learning, that the faculty will have to look into. In fact, when the pandemics, when the pandemic came in and we all shifted into online teaching, today people are talking about asynchronous, synchronous, and hybrid. But whatever you talk, in fact, you cannot make a learner a human robot or a teacher into a human robot. It's just not possible. But try and think whether they are really processing the information. Don't tell me driving information from point A to point B is research, is learning and teaching. No, those days are gone. So what's actually happening? So can we shift? This is what is called the hydraulic model of teaching, or a hydraulic method of knowledge transfer. So teacher is up there with whatever he knows and is pouring into the students. I don't know if you have really reflected upon this. I really guess realize whether you have found what is the outcome of this. So probably with the hard-hitting lectures, that the pumping of information on the students, right, you will find in the bargain, many of them topple. Okay, and most of the time, like me now, I've been trying to put across information to you. Most of this is tumbling out of the tumblers, or representatives of students there, right? So everything is going haywire. right? So therefore, think how you're teaching. So that's important. So I think, I mean, we all know that all of you are specialists, but now look at pedagogy, look at instruction, look at new ways of how you can really engage the student. So I'm not going to very latest references, but I'm talking about how factors influence student learning. Now, when we talk about, everybody talks about high level of engagement, right? Who is a highly academic oriented or academically motivated student, right? Now, very simple. Now, when you look into the references and the works of John Biggs, and the whole dynamics, the whole engagement, interaction, teaching and learning is put on a graph, you will find whenever the teaching learning, the lecture method, right? Or engaging in a 40 or 50 minute of hard-hitting lecture, when you're giving a passive lecture, you find the student activity is, I mean, you find very, very, I mean, the students are very lowly motivated. I'm not going to the deconstruction of the gold graph, but my idea is just to tell you now, how do you actually, when does a highly motivated, how do you get a high level of engagement? Okay, now it happens, say, for example, on the high level of engagement, if you're theorizing, note-taking, explaining, right? Now you find it on the lower end of the continuum. Okay, so say, for example, the standard lecture. But then on the other side, when it's problem-based learning, which is inquiry-based, when it's active, right? So it is possible even the less motivated or the less academic student may get engaged, and the gap between the point A and point B, where you find the passive, the less motivated student who are at the lower level of engagement, the gap can narrow down. So to put it in a very simple way, I'm saying that we need to look at what is really affecting the student learning. Now, that's another big challenge in our classrooms. Okay, right. Now, let me bring to the context a very interesting idea, which even David Cole talked about. Okay, I'm just focusing on what is this inquiry learning cycle. So, inquiry learning cycle, basically, this is a design. The inquiry learning cycle is recommended as a basis for both design and implementation of classroom teaching practices. So, therefore, you begin with a problem and get students to act upon that particular problem. So they reflect, and based on the reflect, they further get into inquiry. So therefore, if you can get into the basics and look at how you're driving content in the class, how you're delivering your matter, can you give an environment of how you can create this learning, the inquiry learning cycle. So that is why, because if you're looking at inquiry, let me at this point of time, let me make my own understanding. Inquiry becomes the centrality of the scientific method. Okay, inquiry is the method of the scientist. Inquiry is the method of learning. Inquiry is the method of teaching, and inquiry is the method of researchers. So therefore, it goes into this whole, unless we look at something what we want to learn from an inquiry perspective, and then we want to act. You look at practical life. See, we act when there is a problem, okay? And then we reflect upon and make a judgment, and then, it leads to further inquiry. So therefore, it's important that we look from, look at the teaching and learning, okay, from the point of view of inquiry. Okay. In fact, they're all big words that are mentioned in the policy and what we are expected to do. But how do we really get into, I'm requesting some time. If you can look at David Cole on the concept of experiential learning, which most of you as teachers would have already, being aware of it, right? So therefore, the whole learning begins with a concrete experience, okay? And then there's a observation and reflection, and then you make, there is some kind of an abstract concept that you form, and then you try to apply that in a situation, and then, based on that, when we look at application, it's already concrete experience, and the cycle goes on and on. So you can read more on David Cole. What I want to mention is that this is called experiential learning, which is basically inquiry based, and learning could be by yourself, and it can be experiential education. The only difference is that when you're talking about learning by yourself, might be called the nature's way of learning, your own practical experience. But learning from others is when somebody carefully designs a learning environment. creating students to go into concrete experience and then to make reflect and to come about with some kind of a reflection in order to learn. So the point I'm trying to make is that I've brought in the third challenge: can our teaching be inquiry based? So you may be wondering, it may work in schools at the pre-university level, at lower level, not at higher education. But then let me remind you, the whole idea of research is inquiry based. Okay, right? And therefore, we need to focus on the idea of inquiry-based inquiry as far as teaching and learning is concerned. So what is important here is that not whether the teachers adhere to any particular model, experiential model, or self-directed learning or whatever, but they focus on making sure that the students are engaging in inquiry, in finding their own information and constructing their own understandings as often as possible in the classroom. Right? I don't want to bring in any theoretical underpinnings, but I'm just interested to tell you that, we need to change. Okay, it's a matter of attitude. It's a matter of drive. It's a matter of commitment and motivation, right? That in an inquiry-based approach, learning is self-directed because it is driven by students' own decision about appropriate ways in which an issue or scenario might be approached. So that's the focus and that's the challenge. Well, in an inquiry-based learning, it's also important that the learners bring to bear that the existing knowledge or experience relevant to the issues. Okay, and therefore, with student-centered, with the onus is always on the student to take initiative. So the moment you bring in the students to take the initiative, they propose routes of inquiry and follow them thoughtfully. So that's the crux of what I wanted to put across as far as the concept of inquiry is concerned. Well, therefore, now let me come to this idea of teaching in higher education is an invitation and a challenge. So when I'm talking about an invitation, I'm looking at educators, professors, lecturers to be a community of inquiry. Okay, so who composes this community of inquiry? What is this community of inquiry? Okay, now, is it our classrooms community of inquiry? Is our university and colleges community of inquiry? How do you build that? Some thoughts as I go across. Well, so therefore, further the challenges are to investigate what is true and reality. The community of inquiry, research has to come out with new knowledge, true knowledge. Learning has to be true. You have to come out with the real identity of the learner. So therefore, reality has to be shared. So that reality which they come out has to be shared, right? Just conduct, what are the bane of our Indian system is that it's examination oriented. Okay, so all of you know in the pandemic times what happened, how the examinations were conducted, and I'm not really sure that most of them were promoted without examinations. What is going to happen in the next 10 years, whether they're going to survive the global changing of employment landscape or no, only time will tell. So, but what is important in a community of inquiry is engage in a collective enterprise in the pursuit of knowledge and data. So therefore, the community, you convert the classroom, no students and teachers, they become a community of inquiry. And that is left to the university to make a meaningful thought about it. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that if we are to engage in the process of inquiry, we need to create a community of inquiry. So what does this mean? Now, I'm bringing in Garrison and Anders' thought on this whole idea of community of inquiry. So it is a critical community of learners. I think, look at the focus. It's on the community of learners from an educational perspective, and is composed of teachers and students transacting with the specific purpose of facilitating, constructing, and validating understanding and of developing capabilities that will lead to further learning. All right. So this is what entails or encompasses what is called as a community of learners. So such a community encourages cognitive independence. It talks about social interdependence simultaneously. Okay, so we will talk about these aspects as we go along. Can make all our campuses a community of inquiry, and that's where the inquiry. Now I'm moving from the basic idea of research to the whole process, the how process of the learning, the engagement, the community. Okay, so let me give you the concept and the framework. So when you talk about the community of inquiry, we are basically looking, it's grounded in collaborative, constructive view and examines independent but overlapping elements of the educational experience. So therefore, there are three important aspects to this whole idea of community of inquiry. One is called the social presence, then the cognitive presence, and the teaching presence. Okay, so that's what Garrison, Anderson, and others. So therefore, having said that, now the whole community of inquiry, the framework is in these three, and I'm sure that many of you know what a Venn diagram and what is the influence of the subsets, the role of that. Okay, so now let me take one at a time. When we talk about the cognitive presence, we are basically talking to the extent to which the learners are able to construct and conform meaning through sustained reflection and discourse in a critical community of inquiry. Okay, now we are looking at the social presence. When we're talking about social presence, it refers to the ability of participants in a community of inquiry to project themselves socially and emotionally as real people. So therefore, in your classrooms, is the student's identity being brought out? Is he actually the real person in the learning process? Okay, therefore, the full personality through the medium of communication is being used. Look at the kind of politics that goes on in the classroom. Okay, many times everybody are not their real self. They're not the real personality they are. Most of the time, they are learning in a hidden way. So therefore, in fact, the teaching presence talks about how the teacher, having considered the social presence and this cognitive presence, designs the facilitation and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of realizing personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning outcome. So what I'm trying to say is that when you look at social presence, the cognitive presence are, the student driven, whereas the teaching presence is how the teacher, for example, on an online platform, it's dependent on the teacher. For example, if I have to give on a one-to-one engagement, the whole climate is different. The whole learning climate is different. But then when I go on a YouTube or on a larger context, the understanding is different. The whole dynamics. This, in fact, in a way sums up the role of the three important aspects, for the educational experience, which includes the social presence, the cognitive presence, and the teaching presence. Okay, why I'm using the word presence is that they are all active in the learning environment, and that's the key. Okay, so when we're talking about social presence, as I already mentioned, it's the ability of the participants in a community of inquiry to project themselves as socially and emotionally as real people. All right, so the point is that the personal characteristics should be brought out in the learning environment in the classroom, okay, thereby presenting themselves as real people. But this really doesn't happen as far as our classrooms are concerned. All right, the next aspect which I want to mention about the social presence, so critical, we use the word collaborative, okay, right? The ability of participants to identify with the community, okay, to communicate purposefully in a trusting environment. So is our learning classrooms a trusting environment? People are learning with fear. There is no freedom. There's no liberty. The moment you talk and question something, it is already saying that you are, it's called sedation. You cannot argue, you cannot raise arguments. So what are arguments? The centrality of the problem that, learning is to raise arguments. Give freedom and liberty for children to learn. So arguments arguments are evidence-based. From where the evidence comes from certain sources or certain events, okay, right? Otherwise, we cannot allow students to have this trusting environment of learning, okay? Especially many of our university campuses and many of our classrooms are treacherous for that, not allowing students to learn in an environment of trust, so that's something which we have to integrate, right? Where will inquiry happen? So having said that, now the cognitive perspective, talks about how the extent to which the participants in any particular configuration of a community of inquiry are able to construct meaning through sustained communication. So communication becomes very important. And having said that, the teaching presence that I talked about, it talks about the design and the facilitation is the direction of cognitive and social presences for the purpose of realizing personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning experiences. All right. So what is the interconnected influence of all these things, all these three aspects of the community of inquiry in a classroom? occur in a learning engagement situation, right? Theoretically, it indicates that are interconnected and influence each other. So this suggests that, the elements overlap. But the point here is that social presence and teaching presence contribute to the setting of the climate, as I mentioned, for learning. So that's very critical. So allow students, to come into that environment. Secondly, components of research presence and cognitive presence contribute to supporting discourses, how they can collaborate and discuss. And the mix of cognitive presence and teaching presence assist with selecting content and the delivery mechanisms. All right. So that's very, very important that you need to understand. So having said that, what is this whole idea of community inquiry, how you can get this going into your classrooms? It starts with posing questions. As I told you, what are questions? Questions are arguments. From where are the arguments coming from? Arguments comes from, events, occurrences, and phenomena, if you want to call. So what are these phenomena? How do you say that there is an argument, there's an evidence? Because these are incidents that have occurred, right? And therefore they have sources. Okay, there is evidence for these occurrences. So allow students to pose questions. And therefore, according to the concept of creating an inquiring environment, there's a need for criteria that is acceptable. Acceptable to who? Acceptable to the learners, accepted to the facilitators, the teachers, that environment. Okay, and there is a collective dialogue. So there's a continuous dialogue. I'll explain each one of them, so that this is one way that you can transform your classroom and bring in that inquiry, bring in that research, bring in that problem-based, bring in that self-directed learning in the classroom. So, what I'm trying to posing questions. So when you're talking about posing question is the freedom to question, as I mentioned. Okay, the ability of questions. You get students to question, they never ask questions. Okay, the moment that somebody asks questions, they're snubbed. All right. Therefore, so the value and the validity of questions. So these are three important things that we need to train our students to be part of this whole idea of research integrated teaching and inquiry-based learning. All right. So answers to these questions will be real. Why I'm saying is that look at the social presence, trusting environment, real, right? Students own the learning and teachers become facilitators. Okay. So that's very important. And when you're talking about the need for criteria, now criteria has to be a understanding between the parties concerned as far as learning is concerned. Okay, so why? Because the students are less experienced inquirers. So this facilitator, the teacher's role, will often need to assist students to formulate the questions and ideas. So therefore, an environment should be created to raise these questions and to revise ideas, construct criteria, clarify concepts, construct alternatives, find reasons, make connections, and draw inferences while being careful not to impose their own ideas on the student. That's the point. Okay, so if you're looking at methodologies as well as warranted result inquiry needs to be sociable. Okay, right? The role of teachers is to generate criteria. Okay, criteria becomes a basis for student learning. Okay, they should know. I mean, today we're talking about outcome-based learning, but are students really understanding what is expected of a particular course at the end of the course, right? Or at the end of a particular program, a degree program, they need to be aware, all right? So criteria enable shared judgments. Okay, so why we're talking about this? Because the need for criteria should be discussed, and that is acceptable to all. Because disagreements are fertile. It indicates lack of judgment. Look at, see, our televisions today. I'm not naming any of that. All the televisions have shifted the way of how they present the news. They go on for debate. They are opening. When televisions can happen, what about our classrooms? But still we are like newspaper readers, right? What you call news readers. We're presenting information. So there should be arguments and discussions. Up to you to agree or disagree with me. All right. So therefore, discussion of criteria or meta discussion enables common judgment, because learning is having competence of making better judgments. Okay. So unless you enable students to be critical thinkers, people who can reason and look at issues from and arguing it out, no learning can happen. So the third important aspect that I wanted to mention here is about collective dialogue. So when we talk about collective dialogue, on the questions. So when you raise a question, there should be a discussion. We talk about collaborative learning. We're looking at learner-centered approaches. We're looking at outcome-based learners. Please go back and understand the basics of what is collective dialogue. So when we get into collective dialogue, it has to be viable and acceptable answers, because the range of perspective expands a collective horizon regarding what is true. So we are moving and trying to find what is true. So knowledge production is a collective process based on proof, evidence, and reason. Nothing beyond that. Okay, so that is how you can go about creating a community of environment. So therefore, the question, the process, the probable answers unite in creating a community that is always inquiring, a community which is always collaborating, a community which is always in dialogue and discussion. Okay, so what is actually happening? Don't go to research journals or published articles. Now talk about a problem in real time. Let research be action. Let teaching be action, not a passive, dead, brag, information-driven environment. So therefore, all this depends in how you can create and engage, what is called as an environment of collective inquiry and thinking. So in a way, I have said whatever I have to say. So where are we heading? So quickly, let me ramble up and say research and teaching. Okay, so building a research culture. So what is this big culture, concept of culture, and how research culture in higher education is exclusively, creating an institution which is research oriented. Now, why I put this across is taking the cue from the national policy and the UGC and what the government is expecting. You're going to look at your institution as an institution which is going to be research culture oriented, or just a teaching. You want to be called a teaching institution, be a teaching institution. You want to be called a research institution, you call yourself research. Who will survive, who will perish, God alone knows. So therefore, from the institution, the responsibility goes to the department. I would say from the department to every individual faculty. So therefore, having said that, so, this is something that of my mind, I created this, right? All the three elements, okay? In other words, to target research and to bring about effective teaching and learning, engaging, community of inquiry, whatever, right? Is what the NAC is looking for. Is ask, you ask definition from NAC, what is best practices, innovative teaching? Innovative teaching cannot come from textbooks. We cannot have a publication from textbooks, right? Every time they're asking best practices in teaching learning curriculum, it has to evolve from the community. When you don't allow students to ask questions, when you don't allow creating a community of inquiry, where can the best practices happen? You ask yourself, and I'm challenging you these things. And, you get into NIRF ranking and other rankings, global, whatever. There is a serious problem as far as our teaching and learning is concerned, right? And therefore, it's all about a culture. Okay, culture is, the concept of culture might be originated from anthropological and sociological sciences, but it basically talks about what and how we do things here. Right? So do you have a research culture? Okay, I'm just trying to use this concept. Basically, culture refers to patterns of beliefs, values, norms, and behaviors learned from other members of the society. We're looking at a society today. What is a society? We're looking at a community. We're looking at a community of inquiry. So therefore, it talks about an institution's legacy, traditions, culture, its values, missions. If you look at any quality framework today, it talks about what is the organization's values, core values, vision, and mission. Now, I'm talking about it's the culture of the institution, culture of the organization. So it's the values, beliefs, and attitudes that constitute a pervasive context for everything we do and think in an organization. MacLean and Marshall and Mullins in 2002. Now, this is not the what you call as the independence of anthropological and sociological sciences to enjoy the idea of culture, bring the concept of culture into the educational realms. So therefore, we could say that, we look at the institutions or the institutional culture, or what is called as an organization culture. All right. So therefore, what does this culture basically entail? it basically includes artifacts from the basic understanding of culture, so all that is visible, organizational structures and processes, which is hard to decipher. So therefore, how do you tell your institution has a research culture? Then what are the exposed values, strategies, goals, or philosophies? And what are its justification? Are you really publishing? Is there what do you call consultancy happening? Is there faculty-driven grants being got for research? Okay, so therefore, the basic underlying assumptions, the unconsciously taken for granted beliefs, perception, thoughts, and feelings. What I'm trying to put it in a nutshell is that, is it there in the bloodstream of every institution, in the bloodstream of every faculty in an institution? So therefore, that's what is research culture all about. That's what is the extrapolating the idea of culture. So when we are extrapolating the idea of culture into an institution, into an organization, whether it is Edgar Sheen, Cameron or Quinn, whoever's done research on culture, it's basically talking about institutions culture from when we look at institution culture, there are researchers, for example, Bingham and Nix 2010, they talk about institution policies, practices, beliefs, and what can there be anything beyond teaching, learning, and research in an organization that affect the careers of lives of faculty, staff, and staff administration and students, right? We need to redefine these terms. Okay, what is our institution culture? Okay, so what is university culture? What is the academic culture? We talk about academic, the term academic culture has been used. Culture of universities mainly consists of academic outlooks, academic spirits. We're using very big words, academic ethics and academic environment. Do you want an institution to be known by, a flouting of academic ethics? Right now, look at the way now. In fact, UGC has given very clear guidelines of student publication, student assignments. It cannot be plagiarized. Okay. Then we also talk about campus culture in university, in a university that's characterized by individuality, academic features, opening and leading variety, and creativity. And therefore, there is, the campus culture, the department culture, and so on and so forth. Okay. So having said that, research culture is the set of shared, taken for granted, implicit assumptions that members of a higher education institution hold about research. And that determines how they perceive, think about, and behave with respect to research activities. All right. So that's based on Edgar Sheen's basic definition of culture, how we can integrate that. So having said that, Edgar Sheen talked about three important aspects. He talked about basic assumptions. He talked about values. He talked about artifacts. So you can read up, like the layers of research culture, like layers of an onion. He explained this, right? I've just the idea based on the works of Dr. Benito Tihanki from De La Salle University, where I had my fellowship program in the Philippines, right? You will find this very interesting three ideas. So basic assumptions are higher education exists to do research. That's a basic assumption, right? Now, if the national policy is talking about it, it has already been well said in from times immemorial. Right? So values, we value research activity and dissemination. What are artifacts and behaviors? They are relaxed, creative, collaborative, informal faculty discussion of research activities. Why is the classroom an inquiry based, or at least an inquiry based? Okay. So the artifacts and behaviors, you look at incentives for innovative research. Why should there be an incentive for innovative research? Okay, the research journals are existing from times immemorial. Why are we not writing? All right. So therefore, the moment you do that, you are doing research publishing, and it does not end there. Bring that experience back into the classroom. All right. So that's what we are talking about in terms of the three important aspects that what Edgar Sheen talked about, and how you can extrapolate that into the higher education realms. Okay, so therefore, research is an integral part of higher education. So, so what is important is what I want to also re-emphasize and tell that is, if you're looking at the value aspect of it, we are talking about students, how they should value the chance to learn in an environment where academic inquiry seeks to truly change the world. Okay, faculty try to put learning through research as the center of their teaching. And through most courses, you have the chance to learn research skills. teaching you not only how to answer, but how to question. All right. So now some of the artifacts could be, do you have a research center, major research projects? Okay. So if you look at natural and physical sciences, you have special labs set up under the potential of what you call institutions of potential excellence for potential excellence. You know, there are so many grants available. What is the government trying to tell? There's a subtle message in that. Start an artifact and behavior of a research culture and teaching in the university. Right. So look at the Center for Publication. So all that we're talking about is innovative, creative, and research mindset. Gone are the days when we were lecturing. So teaching and lecturing definitions have changed. We have to redefine that. And where all this happens is that unless this behaviors happen in the department, it cannot happen. Who is the department, right? Universities are known by the departments. Okay, say for example, if you look at several, the Princeton Medical School, the Harvard is known for its business, not for any other subjects. No, because of the Harvard Business School, the other departments get a flip. Okay, so therefore the departments, the schools, right? Now the department becomes the hub of academic activity. So therefore, what is the kind of research paper presentations happen? What are the opportunities for publishing, where students are involved, where there is a community of inquiry happening? So the point I'm trying to make is that the role of research cultures in higher education, when we are trying to examine that, it is being notoriously neglected. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm not running a quiz on that. Secondly, for research to be sustained, it must be part of the higher education way of institutional history and life and its culture. So culture is not built today. It's not built tomorrow. I mean, it is over time. So your past and the present and the future plays a critical role. Okay. So if you want to be a research institution in the next decade, please start the work today. All right. So that is important. And most importantly, when we talk about this research, individually targeted external incentives are not enough, and it will only be a knee-jerk responses that can be counterproductive. So research has to be from that context. Okay, right? Don't make it, which is rewarded externally. But then change your perspective. It should not be a knee-jerk response. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, having said that, research is not the end in itself. It must be utilized for teaching and service. That's where the blend comes. So findings of research should be blended into teaching, and that should allow you to give a feedback. So when this happens, it allows you to build something called a social capital. Okay, so activity, research activity happens from the social connections among the community, which become members who become part of this community of inquiry. Okay, and that is built by competence and resources that are available, and that forms a social capital. So teaching is not just taking a content and going in. There's much more larger things that we need to think about. Okay, so therefore, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that I will also look into curriculum. Now, when we're looking at curriculum, all of us know we're talking about the content that has to be delivered. Okay. Now we may talk about backward design. Today we may talk about outcome-based research. Gone are the days when somebody else was designing the curriculum. Today the learner decides the curriculum. He will pick the course. When you talk about multidisciplinary, you look at we don't have to be in campus for 3 years and then called as a dropout from degree course. He can walk out of the first degree and get a certificate. Come out of the second degree, get a diploma, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of thinking gone into the whole thing. So it revolves around the curriculum, revolves around educational methods and evaluation. So what the point I'm trying to make is that we have to be current, we have to be contemporary, and we have to match to the contemporary developments in a particular, because we concerned area, and we have to look at the future, right? So can your research add new curricula, new courses, or your existing courses can be strengthened by curricula? So as Wendell says, Oliver Wendell, the great thing in this world is not so much where we are, but in what direction we are moving. That's going to be critical. And I'm sure that many of you would have seen this particular picture, right? Now, we heard about the recent Paralympics being conducted, and then we had the Olympics being concluded. Right now, why I'm bringing this, I'm not putting into a question and answer session, but what I'm trying to say is that look at the way high jump, I mean, how high jump is practiced today. There was a time when people used to look at jump straight forward, but it happened in the year 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, when this man called Fosbury brought you different way of jumping. And the point I'm trying to make is that you have to look at different, and this is only happens because of research. So creation of new knowledge, research thinking is what is going to bring about a new way of thinking. That's how this great, what is called as the Fosbury flop became popular. And today everybody jumps the way that he jumps. So the purpose of research is to move forward. Okay, he had difficulties, he couldn't jump straight forward, but he could clear the heights very easily, and research habits will open up new opportunities. And if we also would have thought the way that other people have thought, I'm sure that we would not have had, we would not be in this position today, he would not have achieved the great heights. So what is plaguing our curriculum today? Okay, so it's totally theory based. Why can't it be research based? Okay, so what is happening in the minds of the students? The graphic very well clear says, I am still waiting for the day that I come, that I will actually use in real life. Okay, and this in fact leads to serious gaps in employability, because our system is examination oriented. All right, so therefore, having said all these things, now I'm moving into a little bit of understanding how we can bring this to the understanding of idea of research integrated teaching. So, well, just to reinforce, because I'm embarking upon understanding teaching is a system of action which include learning through interpersonal relationship. If the classrooms, when I'm banking upon this idea of community of inquiry, if there's no collaboration, there's no interaction, there's no allowance for arguments, there is no freedom, you have already defeated the academy of learning. You have defeated the academic of academics. Think about it. Okay, because teaching is intellectual, emotional, and involves skill, what I call as manual. So it involves cognition, affection, and it talks about the will and commitment, the volition and striving to put all that together. So all these dynamics happen, and today, in fact, these things are not new, right? Today we have got something called the fMRI, what is called as the functional magnetic resonance imaging, to look at how the brain functions. But look at the great people like Bloom and others who talked about cognition, affection, phonation much before this technology could come, and how the brain functions and how learning happens. Okay, so therefore, just to look at the equation. Okay, well, when we're looking at teaching, it has to be a culture. This is something which I talked about in one of the talks many years back. Today, the things have changed. We have to have a teaching culture, but a teaching culture is now shifted to a culture which is research based. So when we're looking at the what are the dividends? How do you get this quotient? Now, it should be an institutional philosophy. All right, the teaching culture should be an institutional philosophy. There should be an institutional policy. There should be an individual commitment, and there should be innovative content and methods. That's what is going to create a teaching, a research integrated, research informed culture. So that's the that's what. Please, I appeal to all of you as faculty of higher education. We all know that we can teach mathematics well, we can teach chemistry well, but can we go away and think and reflect, and can we go through a process and understand how we want to do this, and do we want to give the content to them, or we want to look at something else? Okay, get them to go a little more beyond. So can the teaching shift? So that's my basic point, and that's my last point of argument for today, right? And let me look into this. Appeal whether you can shift the teaching. So what I'm trying to say is that the concept like research informed teaching, research integrated teaching, has come into play, and there's a lot of literature worked on that. A lot of people are talking about how to look at just from mere transaction of information. Okay, why? Because the focus of studies on the undergraduate experience has been mainly concepts. Nobody wants concepts. Okay, if they are impractical, it's not good. See, fundamentals are required, but then how are these fundamentals operative, functional? Please ask. Okay, and most often from the perspective of academics rather than the student. Okay, so I'm giving you works of Brew, Healy, Jenkins, who have done extensive work on understanding what research-informed teaching is all about. Well, having said that, there is thinking where the idea of the university vis-a-vis affiliated autonomous colleges, okay, or state university, private universities, as a place where students and academics push forward the boundaries of knowledge by conducting research in a relatively new one, given the long history of universities in Europe and Middle East, Asia and Middle East and Asia. So thinking is on. So therefore, what are we going to do with the textbooks? Textbooks are no use today, right? We need only if we can, use that textbooks, how to process information. It will become a great what you call as testimony for exploring the truth. All right. So having said that, in the 19th century Europe itself, so you find the Humboldtian university ethos is based on the principle that university should treat learning as not yet wholly solved problems, and hence always in the research mode. This is about a reference which happens in 1810, quoted Elton 2005. Okay, so teaching and learning, I mean, what is the call? The Clarion call is teaching and learning has to become research intensive. All right. So, having mentioned about this idea, research-informed teaching is not just about pedagogical research or research into higher education. It's about the complex interplay of the core activities of higher education linked by their mutual relationship to learning. And research-informed teaching is making reference to relevant academic research in the course of subject teaching. All right. So, and it goes on and on. Several references. So Griffith's 2004 terms research-led teaching, where the focus is on the processes through which knowledge is produced, places emphasis on developing skills of research and inquiry, on developing research culture in which students are encouraged to think about and how knowledge is developed and how they can be engaged in that process. So I'm basically trying to consolidate all my discussions today. You can read the 19th century Cardinal Newman's description of university, where he talked about as a place where the pursuit of knowledge and the education of the intellect were mutually supportive, provided a template for liberal education in growing university sector for the next 100 years. Okay, so therefore, university taken its bare idea has its object and mission that it educates intellect to reason well and in all matters to reach out towards the truth and to grasp it. All right. So, and therefore, discussions go on and on. I'm not going to, because paucity of time, I'm just looking at the last point, trying to summate. It is of the utmost importance that the ablest who are capable of going forward to original work should be infected at the very first entry to higher education with a sense of the potential of their studies. That's very important. So therefore, it's important for university staff, college staff, to both teach and carry out research. All right. So, a couple of more slides, and then we will wind up. So, how we have been looking at research, okay, from the works of Barnett and Hallam. Now, they talk about, this is called something called an incompatible thesis. Okay, so where one research is compromised for teaching, but then they also propose another model where it's called a linear model, a model where it's called the intersubjective model, where it overlaps and teaching and research are inseparable and compatible, how much we bring teaching and research balance. Okay, so having said that, there is a nexus between research and teaching, okay, that all academics identified by the students as good teachers, studies show that there were only, with only one exception, active researchers. Okay, so therefore, the point I'm trying to make is that not all active researchers were identified as good teachers, suggesting that active research involvement is a necessary but not sufficient condition for good teaching. However, we are all researchers now. Teaching and research are becoming ever more intimately related. In a knowledge society, all students, certainly all graduates, have to be researchers. Okay, not only here, they engage in production of knowledge, they must also be educated to cope with the risks of uncertainties generated by the advance of science. All right, so I would just want to propose one important um, model, the framework for thinking, teaching, and research, right? So teaching can be research-led in the sense that curriculum is structured around subject content, and the content selected is directly based on the specialist research interests of teaching staff. So the traditional information transmission model, the emphasis tends to be on understanding research findings rather than research processes. And therefore, there is limited emphasis is placed on maximizing the potential positive impacts of teaching on research. So to underline this, right, it's important that we understand that careful attention is given to the teaching of inquiry skills and on acquiring a research ethos. The research experience of teaching staff are brought to bear in a more diffuse way. All right, I won't go into more details of this. Let me come to one important model by Jenkins and Healy. I just want to share this. Here, there are 4 quadrants. When you're integrating research into teaching, when we talk about research-based, curriculum emphasizes students undertaking inquiry-based learning. So where students learn as researchers. Okay, so at the end of the axis, you will find on the vertical axis, students as participants and students as audience. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis, you find emphasis on research content and emphasis on research processes and problems. All right. So what happens when the curriculum is designed? Research-oriented curriculum emphasizes teaching process of knowledge construction in the subject. So what actually happens to students? Where students learn research processes and methodologies. So now you have to analyze whether you're only talking about students where students learn research process and methodologies. Then come to the next quadrant. Now this next quadrant talks about research-led curriculum, which is structured around teaching subject content. So where students are taught research finding in the field of study. So most of us are doing that. So when I teach a subject like chemistry or computer science, I'm bringing those findings in. But what is important is that when you go to the next quadrant, right, where research tutored curriculum emphasizes learning, focus on students writing and discussing papers or essays. Now, this is the key slide that I wanted to share today. And there are different ways of experiencing research-informed teaching. I will just take a couple of minutes because I'm not going to let you go right now. There is a couple of ways of doing it. So if the teacher is a transmitter, a detective, catalyst, agent, and a wayfarer. So what does a transmitter do? A transmitter emphasizes the skill of the teacher in translating abstract knowledge and ideas into comprehensive signals so that students can understand disciplinary research. Well, what does a detective do? Like a detective, emphasizes the skills, tools, and methods. And this is the metaphor of detection implies a systematic diagnostic and attention to details and soft skills. Now, what does a catalyst do? So he emphasizes the idea of causing a reaction which precipitates change and teaching folks on transformation in the industry and the real world through research. All right. And of course, the agent, what does the agent do? Now, he positions students as agents of their own learning, exploring knowledge and theories independently to become self-authors or producers of new knowledge. So therefore, it's based on student-centered or learner-centered approaches to learning. So all your case study methods, your experiential methodologies, your inquiry-based approaches all come under this. Students participate as active learners and the agents of their own learning. All right. Now, last comes the wayfarer, who encapsulates and relates to other dimensions in different ways, encourages open-ended curiosity, walking to unknown destinations not yet known. So therefore, questioning becomes the centrality of that. What, how, so what, for whom? And the teachers are seekers who promote the joy of inquiry, developing a passion for exploration among students. All right. I know it's a long presentation, but then let me also give, I have 2 slides to share with you, the possible system dynamics of higher education institutional research is where you have this idea of social capital. You're looking at the networks that you have, and it's to create this research teach culture, you need to put in a place called something which is called as the culture embedding mechanism, and that's how you build a research culture into the institution. So what are the benefits? You build up research capability, research productivity increases, and research utilization. And back again, research utilization enables research productivity and research capability. So these are all important aspects that one wants to put across as far as teaching research is concerned. And therefore, one important idea: what happens if faculty take research? The onus is on the faculty, and I won't go into explanation of this particular slide, but only one thing that I want to mention is that research-led teaching should involve faculty research, and which leads to student research formation and student research. And therefore, when this happens, it leads to contribution of professional knowledge. It leads to faculty public policy advocacy. There's effective professional practice, very complicated practice like law, medicine, have thought about these dynamics. And therefore, where are we heading? We're looking at national development. Okay, so that's where I'm trying to come up. But I'm not going into, if you want a model, please try to look up this interesting, what you call classroom that Robert Bickner has conceptualized in the North Carolina State University, where he looks at student active learning environment for upside down pedagogy. So it's called the scale-up model, which brings together active learning approaches already being used by many, that creates the right physical environment to make this work well. So I won't go into the details. You can read up more from the what you call as the net and the works of Robert Bickner, but he talks about how groups of 9 can be divisible by 3. It's technology integrated. What I'm fascinated to tell you is you can use flipped classroom, you can use student-led learning, whatever you want to make inquiry and learning as an inquiry process, but the design is important. So you will find that the facilitator is hardly teaching. Look at the setup of the classroom. Now there is a table with 2 or 3 students here, maximum of 3 students. They're given, each problem is different. So they work on the problem and the facilitator comes there and each one's points are connected to the laptops and then into the screen. And then, when the discussions are put together, everybody's data is up on the screens and all the screens to put together. Now, this is how, what do you call, the inquiry process happens. That's one example. Okay, so you can read works from Checkering and Gamson, where he talks about 7 principles for good practice in undergraduate education, where the scale-up classroom active learning scale-up is based on problem solving, inquiry, and flipped active methods. So inquiry and inquiry 2. All right. Okay. So I'm not going in, I just wanted to talk about these things to you. So what is the role of the university? It creates knowledge and not disseminate knowledge. Please, this is the bottom line. The writing is on the wall. Okay. So research is inquiry, and research is self-discovery, and self-discovery can happen by seminars, workshops. And in conclusion, let me tell you, teaching is research-informed and integrated. Lecture is sharing the latest research in the area. 50% research-informed teaching and 50% self-directed. You have to change this balance. All right. So that's where I want to conclude. Since it is the September is dedicated to the teachers, I would like to conclude my talk that the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. So inspire everybody through research, inquiry, and let your teaching be research integrated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Participants, if you have any doubt, please, you can raise a hand on your Zoom.
If they are able to unmute and speak, that's also fine.
Sir, could you please be able to give some example for this?
I had already mentioned about, I give you one example with regard to one classroom design where you can, follow that up on the net. I mean, this is what is called as in the North Carolina University, where Robert Bickner has experimented. Okay, you can also try this, provided you can build that what you call capability. It's called as a scale-up classroom, where you can bring in that integrated, what you call as teaching, research integrated teaching. All right.
Sir, Agnes Roshni has asked you to explain an equation again. Can Agnes Roshni please unmute yourself and mention what equation you were talking about?
Yeah. Go ahead. I think if I recollect, I'm basically trying to talk about how we looked at teaching at one point of time. We looked at teaching as high quality teaching as a culture, but today teaching is all about methods and content that is research oriented, and it's based on a philosophy, and that philosophy emanates from the work of a collaborative work of both the institution's philosophy and the individual commitment. Which in fact, my appeal is that you can create what is called as teaching should not lead into just a teaching culture, an institution which is excelling in teaching, but then today you have to shift towards the excellence in teaching culture should be research based. That's what it is. Right? Okay.
Thank you, sir. We have another doubt. It was posted by Sandeep Anjat on the chat box. He asks, as a teacher, how can we change prevailing the system into process-oriented learning system?
I already mentioned that, when you look at the teacher and when you already have a curriculum and a content to drive, right, you can bring in this whole idea of inquiry, action, and reflection. Okay, it's in the hands of the teachers, right? Now, if you're looking at very strict institutional regulations, of course, there are syllabus to be covered. Why are you talking about content? Okay, if you actually really analyze, if you take a particular syllabus and a curriculum, the skill component, the competence component, and the outcome component that you're looking at is basically addressed by a few content area. So just don't expand the content. So knowledge is different, competence is different. Okay, so therefore the challenge, the innovative teacher, the creative teacher will try to teach a lot of things by creating an environment. That's why I said the social presence, the cognitive presence, and the teaching presence are important. Change the whole perspective into a community of inquiry. It is possible. Right?
Sir, there is also another doubt. What do you mean by knee-jerking responses?
What happens? You ask faculty in higher education, right? So when you publish, you're getting rewarded. There's a cash reward, okay, etc., etc. Now, that is not going to work on the long-term basis, right? Now, people have to publish. If they don't publish, they will perish. Okay, so that has to come not by external motivation. See, I want to tell you something that when the belly is full, dangling a carrot, you ask organization development and motivation experts, it's not going to attract you. When the belly is already full, you can't eat more, right? So therefore, what is important is that shift that into a passion. That's what I mean to say. That's what is important in today's present context. That's my answer to your question. So don't create knee-jerk reactions. Okay, we will give you incentives, so start writing, start publishing, and things like that. It should happen. As I already told you, that the fate of our institutions is going to be decided whether you're going to be a teaching institution or a research institution. And your what you call accreditation rating and rankings are going to be dependent on that. First of all, think whether you're going to survive or no in the next decade.
Okay, sir, we have another question. Can it go to the next question?
Go ahead, please.
Sir, the question is, how enthusiastic is the government about research in social sciences in higher education?
Why are you going to the government? Just because they're giving a salary? Ask not what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country. That's what John F. Kennedy said. Forget about the government. Forget about your management. This is about faculty development. Meet the challenge. What type of research can be promoted in undergraduate research program? Let me put this across to you. Is there a qualification for research? Who told you not to publish? Who told? That's why in my last slide I said today students should be involved in research. Students should be involved in publication. What kind of research? Any real problem? I started my discussion with that. The definition of research is to look at reality and truth. But what is happening in the classrooms? Yes, fundamental knowledge has to be given, but that should lead from what is known to the unknown. That's high quality research. It applies for faculty, it applies for students, it applies for learning. In fact, just go back into the learning, into the national policy. That's why I said it has to be inquiry driven. It has to be collaborative. So don't worry about the government. Government will do its job of governance. They're given us a policy. I am excited about the policy. I know what's there in the policy. Government is not threatening us. Who is the government? Who are its people? Who are building its citizen? It is the teachers. If you don't do research, and if our medical laboratories in the country did not do research, all of us would have perished by the pandemic. Yeah, inquiry should start from the school level, then it will continue. Yes, 100%. I already mentioned higher education is not at the other end. What you sow, so you reap. It's only in India that PhDs are working in the universities and colleges. An aspirational position. Why the pediatrician does not work with children? Why can't PhDs go back and work in schools and classroom and nursery? Why cannot you develop that critical thinking? I'm sure you'll have many more answers for that. I will not get into those kind of discussions. The questions that a class 5 student asks is the same question that a research scholar will ask, a scientist will ask, because you will not have ready-made answers. You have to go through a process of inquiry.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable feedback and the informative session.
Thank you and most welcome.
I invite Mr. Saurabh from the Computer Science Department for the vote of thanks.
Honorable resource person, Dr. Kennedy Andrew Thomas, respected principal, Father Denny Cholapalli, our most valuable invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening, one and all. It's my privilege to express gratitude on today's invaluable session on research integrated teaching. The session was highly informative and enthusiastic, which we could see from the chat box and post-presentation sessions. I believe all who attended the session are blessed with the indispensable information on the topic. I thank Dr. Kennedy and Thomas on behalf of my institution for the precious time and effort for making this session highly fruitful. Thank you, sir. This 7-day faculty development program is made possible only with the immense support of our beloved principals. I express my heartfelt gratitude to Father Denny Cholapalli, the principal of St. Mary's College, Puttanangadi. Thank you, Father. I thank all participants who genuinely engaged in this 4th day of our FDP. Thank you all for your high-level involvement and cooperation. I also thank the coordinators of this event for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this. Respected dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your great participation in this evening. It is a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, again, and we hope for opportunities to work with you again. Thank you so much. The feedback link has been posted, as you all can see in the chat box. We will be strictly following the 20 minutes rule. So participants, make sure that you fill it on time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you and best wishes. Bye-bye.